Hi, everybody. See how we're doing here. I'm going to check on some of my technology. Can you hear me okay? Throw some of these things on. I see somebody has their hands. I can hear you. Thank you. Thank you for raising your hand. Okay, I'm going to lower your hand. And there we go. Love playing with technology. Hopefully it works this time. Let's see how else would. Are we muted? Yes, you are muted. So you can type the questions if you either on the bottom or on the top. There are two boxes. One is for Q&A, so you can click that, and that's going to save just all of the questions together, which will make it easy for me probably to answer them at the end. And there is a chat box where so there are two click buttons that you can click. One, you can click on panelists and attendees, or you can send private messages to people. If you click on panelists and attendees, then everybody can see your questions. Yes, thank you. I just got a new computer because my other one crashed last week, and I am just so amazed at the picture in this thing. It's like incredible. I was gonna do it somewhere prettier in my house, but this is a desktop, so here we are. But I'm surprised. It's like people can see my wrinkles. Need to do a better job next time. So it's around 6 o'clock, if that's okay. We're just going to give it a couple more minutes before we get started. And I think that I see raised hands, I see questions, I see comments, so that's all working good. That works over there. No wrinkles. You're kind. Thank you. I know. I've been using something personal about me. I've been using eye cream since I was like in my early 20s. And I remember the first time I went there onto the makeup counter and I said, I'd like some eye cream because I'm really worried about my eyes. I have really bad under eye circles, and they are just the way it is. Like when I don't wear any makeup, people are always like, oh, are you sick? I'm like, no, it's just the way my eyes are. So I went and I said, I want some under eye circle because I want some help with that. And she was like, wow, you really don't need that. But I actually think that the fact that I've been using it for so long has really helped with my wrinkles. So I feel like sometimes I feel like, hey, I look pretty good for my age. So that's how you get no wrinkles. Maybe not. Maybe they'll just come like, as soon as you reach a milestone before you know it. I'm very lucky. I have really good genes in my family. My father-in-law, my grandfather, who died in his late 70s, had a completely head full of just dark hair. He didn't even have any gray, which was really, really surprising to me. So I dye my hair, so I already didn't get that, but maybe I'll get like his beautiful, youthful skin forever. So anyway, it's about 6:02, and I think for the interest of being fair to all of the people that came on time, we're going to get started. So I'm going to share my screen. do that. And I'm going to play the slideshow. Hold on, I have to go find my chat. My Q&A. Okay, just so you know, I cannot see the chat box. I can only see the Q&A. So if you have a question, you're gonna have to post it over there. Oh, here, I found my chat. Never mind. Turn off all of my devices. Okie doke. Okay, so I'm gonna move myself. So many moving parts. I need to move myself here. Okay, so refresh. Like when you're doing these things online, there's nobody to introduce you, so it's a little weird. But anyway, I am Chris Scrott-Wiedelton with Organizing Maniacs, and you're here to talk about the 3 mistakes you're making about your paperwork and how to stop it. And I am a certified professional organizer for those that don't know me. The majority of the people I invited to this webinar are friends of Organizing Maniacs and people that we know. This is because it's my first time doing this, so I wanted to do it with my friends and get feedback and make sure that I wasn't going completely insane and just wasting people's times. So I appreciate all feedback, positive and negative. If you don't want to just send them to me in the chat box or in the Q&A, you're welcome to send it directly to me. Once again, I always appreciate feedback. Is this thing gonna work? Maybe not. Okay. Let's see, let's try again. There we go. Okay. So I believe that you can easily and simply organize your paperwork. That is a matter of fact. And I believe that you don't have to live in paper clutter. I also believe that every person can be organized. So, and by that I mean, we're not all going to live out of the Pottery Barn, but you can definitely find a level of organization that can work for you. So some housekeeping, you have made the time to be here. I'm sure you have left the kids locked outside and the dog outside as well. And you have made the time to be here for this call. So I would recommend turning off all your distractions. I know sometimes I attend webinars and I say, well, I'll just watch the recording when they send it to me. And then these things just tend to pile up in my inbox and I never do listen to them. So you're here, I'm here, we all look good, let's just do it. So who am I? I am Chris, and I started Organizing Maniacs, and I specialize in working with clients with brain-based conditions. So the majority of our clients have ADD, ADHD, OCD, and hoarding tendencies. And we tend to work with people that are a little bit messier and a little bit more challenged by disorganization. Not to say that we don't have clients that call here just to get their closet organized, or that, you know, they have a junk drawer that really bothers them. But we do tend to bring all of the simplicity that we work with our clients into just about every project that we organize. And the truth is that the average American receives about 14 pieces of mail every single day, which most of them are bills and junk mail. And most of our clients have paperwork everywhere. And if that's you, you're going to discover in this webinar how to stop shoving all of the paperwork into closets and drawers and obscure places like your basements, your garages, your spare bedrooms. You know, you got stuff there. I've seen it. And if you ever thought, why can't I ever find my bills or my kids' permission slips or my important pieces of paper when I really need it, I'm going to help you through the decision-making process about your paperwork. Then you are in the right place to learn those things. So if you know that you want to not be embarrassed when the doorbell rings and the Chinese delivery guy comes to the door, and you basically just open the door just enough so he can give you the food and you can give him the money, you're probably in the right place. And if you know that you do not want to be embarrassed when your kids' friends come to the house and comment about how messy your house is, regardless of how much time and effort you make in getting organized, you are in the right place. And if you know that you want to have your friends over because you like to entertaining, but your house is so cluttered with paperwork that you could not imagine anybody coming in, you're in the right place. If you know that you want to work in your office instead of your kitchen and have dinners with your family in the kitchen instead of all around the house because your dining room is just as cluttered as your office, this class will probably help you. So this is for you. If this training is for you, if you have a lot of paperwork and you have no idea what to do with it. If you're embarrassed and you're tired and you're ready for change, and you want to stop bagging and shoving and hiding the paperwork everywhere, I'm going to help you start the process of creating a very simple filing system. So what we're going to learn today, we're here to learn the 3 mistakes you're making about your paperwork and how to stop it, and how to avoid those 3 big mistakes that people are making. One is of keeping everything and finally figure out what's really important. How to name files so you can easily file things away and figure out where things are, and how to figure out where to put your filing system to begin with. You'll also learn that I've been working with clients for about 10 years, and people have been asking us for more affordable ways to work with us for a real long time. So I'm going to share how some of you will be able to have the opportunity to work with us in a way that we haven't worked with you before. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about the 7 simple steps that I've created to help people wake up paperless, and how to help them make better decisions about their paperwork, file their paperwork quickly, and even when you don't have any time. So imagine how you'd feel if you could have all of the kids over for a sleepover and everyone would have a good time and nobody would be embarrassed about your stuff. Imagine how you'd feel if you could easily find your paperwork whenever you really need it. And imagine how you would feel if you could file in minutes instead of spending all day on Saturday or Sunday putting your stuff away. And imagine how you would feel if you could work from your office and really have your dining room table as a family room for people to be using for the reason it was intended to. So I believe that there is a huge difference between cleaning and organizing. And I hear people saying this all the time on my Facebook. I'm cleaning before the cleaning lady comes over. And technically what people are really doing is they are organizing before the cleaning lady comes over. And the difference between cleaning and actually organizing are 2 really distinct things. And Marie Kondo says cleaning is one confronting nature, which is all the dirt and the dust bunnies. And organizing is one confronting oneself. And I firmly believe that when you understand how to be more organized, when you understand where your stuff should live, when you understand where to put things, when you have a methodical system for doing things, cleaning before the cleaning lady is a much easier process than when you are basically just shoving things in places just so it's out of the way so she can dust and vacuum. So I started Organizing Maniacs in 2007, and people ask me, why did you pick organizing? And the answer is, I was a little desperate. You know, I had worked for a small remodeling company in Fairfax County for about 5 years. And when the real estate market crashed, they basically went bankrupt. And with that, I went all of my hopes and dreams. And I remember feeling a little angry that I had worked for those guys for such a long time and I had helped them build a business. And I had ended up unemployed with nothing to show for it. And I felt hopeless that that getting a new job like I had before was going to be very difficult. So I started researching, at the time I was a project manager, so I started researching other project management opportunities. And I found a professional organizer that was also a project manager. And I thought, wow, are people doing that for a living? And I said, well, I'm organized. I can probably do that. So I got on the phone and started calling some of the people that I was already doing business with, which were realtors and other subcontractors. And I started freelancing some of my work. And I told a couple of them, they were really my good friends. And I said, I've seen your office. I know you need my services. And one person was very generous with his entrepreneurship, and he really guided me along the way. And that's how Organizing Maniacs basically got started. And along the way, I discovered that my clients were just keeping a lot of paperwork, and nobody knew why they were keeping paperwork. I would ask people like, why do you have this? And they'd be like, I don't know. I just don't know what to do with it, so I'm keeping it. And honestly, at the time, I really had no idea if they should keep it or not. So I started creating very complicated filing systems for people. But then the more time I thought about it, I'm like, why are people really keeping this stuff? Like, what is the benefit of it long term? I just started asking difficult questions about what was the nature of the paperwork people had. And I just went back to researching, like, how long should people keep things? And my research led me into a lot of conflicting information and a lot of confusion. And every time I met with a new client, and I would ask them, like, how do you figure out what to keep and what to get rid of? And they would say, oh, my accountant said I should do this. And then they would give me their accountant's check sheet or checklist of things that they should keep. And it would be different than, like, one accountant would be, A accountant would be different than B accountant, that would be different than C accountant. And I remember one time I met with a client, and her accountant said she should keep every piece of paper forever. And I said, well, that can't be right. So over the last 10 years, I've basically seen it all. I've seen basements full of paperwork. I've seen homes completely overtaken by paper. I've just recently have found bills from the 1960s that people still had. So what I've been teaching people is just not based on, so I've done the research, and I've helped hundreds of clients create simple filing systems. And I know exactly how to help people figure out what they need to keep and what they need to get rid of, just based on their own stuff. It's not based on guessing. It's based on scientific research. And it includes making ruthless decisions about paper without being reckless. And I think sometimes I work with people and they just start throwing everything away, or they start keeping everything. So I think there's a method to the madness that I like to teach people, and I'm going to get into that a little bit today. So some really interesting stats about paperwork. Business Week in 1975 wrote a cutting edge article at the time that said that in the future, which would be about now, we would be completely paperless. And they coined the terminology, the paperless office. And 42 years later, it's hardly the case, right? I just spent the day working in my office today, and I ran out of paper, and I'm probably printing way too much paperwork. And so is the rest of us. We're, on average, employees printing 10,000 sheets, which I think is about 2 boxes, full ream, 10 ream boxes of paper. And that's a lot. And we're bringing that stuff home with us, right? We are working, we have more flexible schedules, so we're shuffling the paperwork between home and work, and we are still keeping all of that paperwork. Harris Interactive reports that about 23% of adults say they pay their bills late and incur late fees. And that's because they lose them or can't find them. I have been guilty of that. I personally estimate, just based on my years of working with clients, that an average American probably receives about 90 pieces of mail in their lifetime, and 1/3 of it is junk mail. And according to the book ADD Friendly Ways to Organize Your Life, this is a real staggering statistics. We received more mail in 1 month than our parents received in a year. And we received more mail in 1 year than our parents received in a lifetime. Our grandparents received in a lifetime. So I'll read that again. We received more mail in 1 month than our parents received in 1 year. And we received more mail in 1 year than our grandparents received in a lifetime. And that's like staggering amount of paper every single year that we get. So you're probably thinking, wow, I can see why my home is completely overrun with paperwork, right? In 1 year, I get more paperwork than my grandparents received in a lifetime. So the biggest mistake I see people doing is they don't know what to do with their paperwork. So they literally keep everything. And they're keeping it forever. And it's not uncommon that I recently wrote a small um, paper on, and I called it, I'll put it here for now, because people say that all the time. They're like, oh, just put this here for now, because I don't know what to do with it. So therefore, it's a delayed decision. I'll just put it here and it'll just become clutter. Um, so here's a story case study. I worked with Kate, and she wanted to move, and she had bought this beautiful home, but what held her from moving was the 12 filing cabinets in the basement filled with paperwork. And she didn't want to move the clutter with her, so she wanted to make decisions about that paperwork. And it was mostly a combination of very old and some new. And they had bills from the 1960s that they had kept since they were married. And so Kay and I basically went through the whole filing system, established what she had. She had manuals for things that she had bought that, you know, no longer existed. She had all sorts of bills and notes and letters and cards, and all. Some of it were valuable memorabilia, but the majority of it was just not useful anymore. And when I started asking her, like, why are you keeping this paperwork? A lot of it, she didn't really know why. So the question I'm asking you is, like, why are you keeping this piece of paper? Try to think methodically about it. Are you keeping it because it goes with your taxes, it substantiate an expense or a write-off that you have used? Is it for something permanent? Does it go with your home? Does it go with your car? Does it go with your pets or your kids? Or do you still own that home? Do you still have that car? Is your pet no longer with us, right? If the pet is no longer with us, the paperwork is irrelevant. Why is this piece of paper really important to you is the question that you should be asking yourself. And how are you going to use it in the future? Just because it's important right now, it doesn't mean that it's something that you should keep forever. It just may have a short-term value to you. So one example of things that I feel like people tend to keep forever, which they be making a mistake on, is like medical receipts. When you go to the doctor, they give you a long piece of paper that tells you that you've been there, that you made a payment. Normally it has some scribbly information. And then, but are you keeping this paperwork because you get to write that off as an expense, or are you just keeping it as an FYI that you went to the doctor? How does this piece of paper value to you? Are you sending it to your insurance company for reimbursement? Or is it, once again, just a piece of paper that you went and now it has no long-term value? So those medical receipts are not the same thing as your medical records and your test results and things that are, you know, surgeries or special consultations you had with doctors. Those are, to me, a little more permanent. So start thinking about paperwork like that. Is this a short-term, do I need it to just for a little while, or is this a long-term, it's probably a lifetime paperwork? So mistake number 2 I see people doing is they have really complicated filing systems. And I worked with a client one time. She had nearly 250 files. 250 files. And it was extremely difficult to find anything. And she always forgot where the stuff that she really needed would be. So we had to go into this complete revamp process. I organized and color-coded the entire 250 files. And even though after I left, she still couldn't manage it, there were too many files. So then she had to hire us to go and maintain her system for her. I was never a fan of having that many files, and I tried to talk her out of it. But she was persistent, and that's what she wanted it. So we always, you know, we try to abide with our clients' goals and needs. But I always ask people, like, how many files do you really need? Are you super complicating the system when you really don't have to? You know, how many filing cabinets do you have, or banker boxes, or for that matter, bags just shoved somewhere in a closet with valuable paperwork? So I just worked with a client not that long ago, and she had 5 folders to store the exact same piece of papers, and they were basically car related paperwork. So the solution to this problem is to eliminate as much non-essential files as you can. So and try to name them in a way that you can remember. So you may call your car a car. Somebody else may call it a vehicle. You know, I call it a Ford because I drive a Ford, and then somebody may call it a Transit because that's the name of the car. I have a friend that names their car. It's George. So how are you labeling these things in a way that you remember? So this particular client with the 5 files, one file was named car, one file was named Jetta, one file was named, you know, title of the car. So she was creating different files because she couldn't remember where the files need to go. So it's very important to remember how is it going to trigger your brain to remember where the paperwork is. Sometimes I see people that also have a lot of like miscellaneous files that they probably could be combined together. And those are things like exercise and self-care and health and meditation and spa and all sorts of like self-care related items. Sometimes I think like you could just commingle all of those into one hanging file instead of having 5 or 6 different files to file paperwork in. So mistake number 3 I see people making all the time is their filing systems are not easily accessible. So it's not really easily accessible because it is under a pile of paper. I just worked with a client. She was putting the paperwork that needed to be filed on top of the filing cabinet, and then the pile spilled onto the floor. So now the filing cabinet is behind the pile of paper. So was she likely to actually go file anything in that filing cabinet? Probably not. It was like, it took me, you know, a few minutes to get the stuff out of the way so I could open the drawers. And then it turns out that the drawers were fairly empty. Once we started filing that stuff, the pile went away pretty quickly. I also worked with a client not that long ago, and honestly, I think I do this a lot. People will have their filing systems in the complete opposite end of the house of where they actually manage their paperwork. So I'll see clients with their, you know, with their filing systems in the basement, in the attics, in the 3rd floor office. So I ask you, where is your filing system located? Is that something that impedes you from actually going to put the paperwork away quickly and fast? Same word. So I worked with a client, Pam, and she could not manage her paperwork. It just kept cluttering up her space. She was pretty organized pretty much everywhere in her house except with her paperwork. And in our very first appointment, we talked about like, where's your filing system? And she said, well, it's on the 3rd floor. And I was like, how often do you go up there? She's like, well, I come down every day and then I go up every day. But by the time I get, you know, to finish the day with the kids and everybody's in bed and whatnot, I forget to take the paperwork with me and I don't want to go into my office. So I never file. So I made a recommendation that we move her filing system to the kitchen. And yes, we had to sacrifice some filing cabinets for that. I mean, some pots and pans cabinet for that. However, that immediately solved her problem because now when she read the mail every day, she could easily just open the door, put the paperwork in there, and then she was good to go. So find a way to move the filing cabinet or the files that you use the most in a very convenient location. Yes, your paperwork is going to need some really good real estate space in your home. In filing, it will basically depend on it. And so I think sometimes people think like, well, I don't really like filing. If I don't have to look at it, I'll be less likely to, you know, to think about it. So I'm just gonna put it way over there where I don't have to deal with it. And that is probably one of the biggest mistakes I see people doing. So normally I take people, when I'm working with them and their paperwork, I take them through a 7-step process to how I call it to how they can wake up paperless. So this summer, I'm actually launching a program, and I'm going to talk about the 3 mistakes people make, and I'm going to tell them a few more things. So I'm going to give you guys a little bit of a preview, if that's okay. So in that filing system, I tell, the system I give people is a 3-part filing system. So you have a permanent filing system like I talked about. You have your home and your car, and you have your kids, and you have your educations and medicals and things like that. And then you have a temporary filing system. And in your temporary files, it's all of the things that people send to you that have no long-term value to you. And they tend to be like utilities and bills and statements and all of the, receipts that we receive. To me, those are short-term. You don't need to keep that stuff forever. How do you manage it? It becomes really important, because that's the stuff that normally clutters our homes. And then there are your taxes, which is the IRS makes us keep a substantial amount of paperwork just to substantiate our expenses and our income. And depending on how complicated your life is, that may be a drawer full, or that may be just a small file. But the systems I help people create, they have to make sense for everybody on their family. Sometimes I work with people and they have really complicated systems, and I say, well, and I say this a lot, if you get hit by a bus, will your family be able to figure out what's happening over here, and will be able to know where to file things or where to find things? And sometimes the answer is no. And if you are answering no to that question, if you get hit by a bus and your family wouldn't be able to find your things, then your system doesn't make sense to the rest of the world. Then your system is kind of useless. Maybe it may be useful to you, but it's not useless. It's not useful to the rest of the people. So to me, that's a way of uselessness. So when I say paperless, I don't mean without paper, because I don't think in my lifetime I'm going to live in a time where people don't have any paperwork. I mean a system that makes sense for your brain and it's easy to maintain. Because really, who wants to spend time filing? Not me. I'm pretty organized. If I had all the time in the world, the very last thing I would ever want to do is file. And I like organizing all sorts of things, but paper, even though it's the one thing that I really thrive at helping people do, it's the one thing that I probably wouldn't do it if I didn't get paid for it. So in the 7 steps, the first step is I always try to understand people's goals. So when you're doing this by yourself, you want to understand, like, what are you trying to accomplish? Why are you keeping this paperwork? Do you have a business? When was the last time you filed your taxes? Have you been audited? All of that has an impact on how long you should keep paperwork. I want to try to understand people's motivation. So nobody wakes up on a Saturday and says, I'm going to go get some labels and a label maker, and I'm going to spend all day organizing my paperwork, and they're just thrilled to be doing it, right? Normally it goes completely opposite. There's a lot of procrastination that happens before you get to that point. And I believe in accountability. I've been part of lots of accountabilities. I graduated from college through accountability. And I believe that when the research shows that you are 75% more likely to accomplish something if you are accountable to someone than if you just wake up and you say, well, maybe I'm going to organize my paperwork today. And then you just go about your day. I always talk about time blocking. So if you don't have time set on your schedule to actually file and organize, it's probably not going to happen, right? So I help people manage that project in a way that it makes sense. Your life is still going to continue going on. So you can't just wake up tomorrow and spend, a week working in your office. You have to manage all of the other things you're responsible for. And are you a morning person or are you a late person? Like, you should probably do paperwork at the time that's optimum for your brain. Because you're gonna be making a lot of decisions, and it's gonna require of you to think. So you don't want to be doing this when you're completely spent. You want to be doing this when you're the freshest. I always talk about mindset. You know, I work with clients all the time. They have failed at being organized several times. By the time sometimes they call us, they're like, "You're my last resort." And I totally get it. You know, I think in my life, I have tried to do a lot of things that I have continuously failed at. Like cooking is one of them. You know, I am the girl that burns popcorn. Um, and maybe one day I can learn how to cook, but I haven't found the need for it yet. I just have found people that cook for me. However, your paperwork is different, right? You may find somebody that manages the paperwork in your house, but if you are the person, you may have to overcome that mindset that you can't manage your paperwork. Just like sometimes I have to overcome my mindset that I burn popcorn. I have to like tough it out and say, I can do this. I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna impress my friends, and sometimes I actually come up with good stuff. But you do have to work on the fact that, you know, I believe everybody can change, and with accountability, that can be a lot easier. You have failed in the past, but now we're gonna do things a little differently. So in step number 2, we also talk about products. Sometimes I meet with people and they have all kinds of things that they've purchased from the big box store, and they're hoping that those tools are going to make them organized. And I don't believe that products make people organized. I believe that systems make people organized. So getting more bins is not going to help you. So we're going to give you a list of the things that we would use if we're organizing your office. Do you have a filing cabinet? I don't know how many times I work with people and they don't have filing cabinets at all, but they expect to have a good filing system. Well, that's not going to work. In order to have a filing system, you probably need to have at least a drawer, even if it's a plastic drawer, that is movable and that you take around the house. You still have to have some place for the paperwork to go into. And I believe that a family of 4 can probably get away with having about 5 or 6 drawers of paper. You know, every family is different and every project is different. I have a client that has an entire 4 drawers of a cabinet with just manuals and things like that. But he has a very large wood shop with a lot of power tools. So that's how a lot of the manuals exist in his life. This is my favorite tool in organizing. This is the label maker P-Touch 1890C from Costco. They normally sell for just under $30. And it includes 2 things of tape. And honestly, the tape alone are like $20 a piece. So you're basically getting the label maker for free. It's one of my favorite things. I think I have 4 label makers myself. As you would expect, I would have more than one. But I still have my original one, which is, you know, almost like my original one is almost like 8 years old and it still works. So in step number 3, I normally help people through sorting. And in the sorting process, I normally say, pick a pile, any pile, and just start making decisions, right? I always like to start with the oldest paperwork. So if you have to dig the filing cabinet from the current stuff and then see what's inside and establish how old is it, do you really need it? By starting with the older stuff, the paperwork is probably aged out, and by that I mean it's just like too old and you don't need it anymore. So you can easily make decisions about that paperwork. And when you start making decisions and you feel like, this is not as bad as I thought it was going to be, you'll probably be much more likely to just give up the paperwork and you start making progress, right? You gain confidence, you make progress. It's a win-win situation, right? Small baby steps here. I like to tell my clients, be ruthless, but not reckless. And so evaluate each piece of paper. Think about it. Do you need this? How am I going to use this in the future? Do I need it for a long-term item like my car, or my home, or my family, or my taxes? Or am I keeping this just in case? And if I don't need it long-term, then I need it for short-term. It needs to go with my temporary paperwork. If you start becoming ruthless by keeping everything, or you start being reckless by keeping everything, you probably need to take a break and stop it and go do something else and then come back and do the project later. It's very easy to get overwhelmed when you're doing paperwork, once again, because you'll be making thousands of decisions. Like when you're organizing a closet, you may have to make, 10 or 15 decisions. When you're working on a pile of paper, you can easily make 100 decisions in just one pile. So try to pace yourself, be diligent, don't just start throwing everything away. I've seen people throw really important things. They say like, oh, that pile is really old, I'm not gonna go through it. And then in the middle of it, there'll be like their passport or their birth certificate or a letter somebody wrote to them that was really important. So don't do that. Commingling is probably one of my biggest advice to people, is like, don't be afraid to group things together. So like your fitness, your exercise, your health, your smoothies, that to me is all like self-care, health related. It will, by putting them together, you'll decrease the amount of files that you have. And so my question is, which one is easier? Is it easier to file 20 pieces of paper in 3 files, or to file 20 pieces of paper in 20 files? I think I know what your answer is. So I teach people extensive record retention guidelines. So once again, I am not guessing at this anymore. We know exactly what you should do with your paperwork. And we should, based on understanding your situation, we can tell you how long you should keep. But if you are just an average homeowner, you should, you only need to keep your taxable paperwork for about 4 years from the date that you filed. And if you have a business, you should keep your paperwork for about 7 years from the date that you filed. So understanding record retention has a lot of complexities to it, right? Like, are you in a lawsuit? So there's more paperwork you may need to keep for that. Do you have a complicated medical history? Do you need to keep all of your medical receipts? Do you have a lot of medical claims you have to submit to your insurance? Once again, then those pieces of papers are not just useless receipts. They actually have value, monetary value in it. I worked with a client one time that had, she had a very complicated medical history, and I spent probably about 3 months with her just submitting medical claims, about 4 hours at the time. And by the time we finished the reconciliation, she received, multiple 5 figures. No, I shouldn't say more. So she received like almost $20,000 worth of cash back from her insurance company for things that she hadn't submitted and that she was entitled to get back. So that's a substantial amount of money. And sometimes I understand that people don't need the money, or they may not be aware of how much money there is value in these things because they needed the medical services, so they went with it. But I think considering what those pieces of paper are can be extremely valuable to you. Have you been audited? Because that makes a difference on how long you should keep your paperwork, right? Because if you've been audited, you're probably at risk for being audited again. You should be much more diligent about your paperwork than somebody that has never been audited before. So it's always important to remember how important is this paperwork to your family and to you, and how are you using it. And if you decide to hang out with us in the boot camp this summer, we're going to go in depth on the record retention guidelines, because I think that is the meats and bones of what people don't understand about paperwork. And once you understand that, it sets a really good foundation to record retention for the rest of your life. We always talk about non-paper related items. So what you do with manuals and electronics and all the accessories and peripherals. We also talk about, kid memorabilia that always ends up in our office, homework and schoolwork and things like that. And the filing part, I always leave it for the end, which a lot of the time surprises people. They're like, why aren't we creating a filing system in the beginning? And I normally say it's because I'm trying to understand all of the paperwork we're going to keep before we actually spend time creating labels and whatnot. Naming convention, like I mentioned earlier, is probably one of the most important part of the process, right? So if you call something a car, let's be consistent and call it a car. If you have a Ford, and that's what you're saying, then let's say I have a Ford. Don't let others influence your labeling of files. And I think in my industry, we always think like, you know, professional organizers are like set on the way they do things. So if you decide to work with somebody, make sure that they're giving you a file that works for you and that you can remember what those words are that you're using. And there's always maintenance, and I think maintenance is also one of the neglected things one of the neglected steps of the process. So you have created this beautiful filing system, and now you're going to need to add paperwork to it. You're going to need to take paperwork to it. I think maintaining it yearly at the very least should be something that you take in consideration and you do. You know, there's always things that age itself out in our paperwork. And if you're just keeping paperwork, you're going to end up like Kay with 12 filing cabinets in the basement, not knowing what to do with it. So I worked with Kathy a few years ago, and her husband called to get their paperwork organized. And they had kept a lot of paper. They had kept everything that sounded valuable to them since they were married, which was about 40 years. And they didn't really know what to start or how to get organized. So their projects was a little bit longer for me, one, because they were an older couple, and two, because they had a lot of paper. But we sorted and organized and agreed on the way we were going to label all the files. We sorted and archived a lot of their taxes. Unfortunately, her husband passed away about 6 months after we started working together. And about a year later, I heard from her, and she told me how valuable the process had been for her. Because she knew where all her paperwork had been, and she knew where her insurance policies had been, where her wills and estate plannings and all of the financial information she needed, all of which made this very difficult time for her a little bit more manageable. And a couple of years after that, she called me again. This has been a long time client for me. She called me again to tell me that she was able to refinance the house all by herself once again, because she knew where all her paperwork was. And I was very proud of her, just as much as she was proud of herself, because this has been somebody that had struggled with paperwork for a long time. And it's always nice for me to see when people actually, you know, learn the process and then they embrace it and then it becomes part of their routine. I think it's always cool to see that happen to my clients. And I worked with a client named Ben, and Ben had been trying to move for years, but he probably was having a hard time making it happen. He lived in the same house for most of his professional career, and once again, his basement was filled with paperwork. He was like the office archivist. You know, whenever somebody needed something, they would be like, "Hey, Ben, do you still have that report?" And he would go in the basement, dig it up, and then give it to them. So that started like reinforcing the bad behavior, because it felt like, well, somebody one day is going to need this piece of paper. And so he basically didn't want to throw anything away. But I was like, Ben, do you want to stay or you want to go? And he's like, I want to go. So we gave some of the paperwork away for the people that needed to keep the paperwork, and they became their own archivist. And we discarded and were definitely ruthless through that process. And he was able to end up with just a couple of boxes. So I want you to imagine if you could find your paperwork easily every single day. And if something happened to you or your significant other, if you could find your important paperwork and not spend months looking for them. And if you could easily file your paperwork weekly without having to spend all day moving piles around your office or shoving things in bag and shoving it in closets because you have somebody coming over. And if you could file in minutes because your filing system was so simplified and it was so easy to identify where each piece of paper could go. So as you can see, we have gone over a lot of stuff. The importance of having good naming convention and filing systems. I talked about how to be ruthless and not be reckless. The value of commingling, how important it is to have your paperwork in a good place. How it is important not to keep every single thing. And so how many of you think you're going to need some help with this? So I want to tell you about the program that I'm doing this summer is it's going to be my paper management 4-week boot camp. And in the fall, I'm going to be introducing this as I'm thinking as a 8 or a 12-week program. But for the summer, I'm going to do a 4-week kind of abbreviated version of it, just to kind of just like exercise, right? You go to boot camp, they teach you how to eat right, they teach you how to exercise, and then you just get your immune system and your body kind of kick-started so you can get in the mode to be exercising, and then you're setting yourself up for a lifetime of change. I just recently, in the last 8 months, gave up sugar and gluten and caffeine and dairy, and that's been a real big change for me. And I started that with the boot camp. I basically did a 4-week accountability program with other people, and it's significantly changed my life in a good way. I was feeling sluggish and exhausted all the time, and when I gave up some of those things, it really changed my life. But the boot camp was the startup place. So this is where we're going to start up with the boot camp. And so the details about the boot camp, it's a 4-week group accountability program. So we're kind of going to meet the way we're meeting here, except there's going to be more interaction. And we're going to meet on Thursdays at 3 p.m. in August. The classes are going to be recorded. So if you're not available, because I know summer is a busy time and you have to go on vacations and whatnot, it will be available so you can listen to it at your convenience. I'm going to give you weekly homework, and we're going to have a Facebook group so you can be held accountable after every call. The program in the fall is probably going to be, I think it's going to be more like 6 months, maybe a little bit less. I'm still working my way through it. I want to kind of get some feedback on the boot camp to see how much information there is. I have mostly helped people one-on-one, so this is going to be a different setting where people are actually going to have to do their own work. And when I'm there hands-on, I can make a lot of things happen for people, but when you're by yourself in your office, it may take more time. So I want to be fair to the process, and I really want to help people succeed. So I'm working out some of those details. But in this program, on the 4-week, we're going to give you a head start, and we're going to give you an introduction. I'm going to give you the basic framework for a filing system. So in the 4 weeks, we're going to sort through we're going to sort through some of your paperwork and start a temporary filing system. We're going to design a simple filing system for you, so you can basically stop shoving the paperwork in bags and in basements and closets and spare rooms and garages, and you can start making better decisions about what to do with your paperwork in your home. So with module 1, we're going to talk about goal setting and motivation, the effective time blocking, organizing mindset. A lot of our clients have brain-based conditions, so we're going to talk about that and how does that impact your filing system. I think that's a really important conversation to have. We're going to talk about effective habit formation. We're going to talk about products, where to put your files. We're going to once again give you our favorite products. We're going to go in depth into record retention on week 2. What should go into your temporary filing system? What should go into your permanent filing system? How do you sort your taxes? How long to keep all of that stuff? On week 2, we're also going to start a document tree. Like, what are some of the naming that you should be using? How does that fit into your family? We're going to do a worksheet on that. Effective naming convention, I think, is like one of the most important parts of creating a filing system. How to be ruthless and not reckless. On week 3, we're going to talk about incoming mail, because it comes every day, 14 pieces, remember. So as we're going through this process, you're still going to be getting mail. All of the non-paper management, the non-paper items that are around your office, manuals, cords, electronics, kid projects. And then we're going to start talking about the beginnings of a really good filing system. And I'm going to let you look over my shoulder as I create some of the stuff live. I've been saving lots of paperwork just for this. So on week 4, we're going to talk about maintenance, because you can't succeed without maintaining. So in this program, you're going to get the 4-week boot camp training. And this is my best work. Seriously, I've been working and thinking about this for probably the last 5 years, and I've been really seriously thinking about it for the last 2 years. And people have paid me a lot of money to organize their paperwork one-on-one. But you're not going to have to invest that kind of money. And like I said in the beginning, I only invited people that I knew to this webinar. So these are people that have done business with Organizing Maniacs, or you're a friend of a friend, or you have requested something on our website. We did not open this to like outside people at all. And in the fall, when I launch this, I'm going to charge around $2,500 for it. But I'm giving you this program, as I said, it's a trial for $497. And I like to give a lot of value. People that have, that have done work with me knows that I am as much of a resource to people as I possibly can be. And I don't mind when people pick my brain. So I'm going to give you guys that sign up for this program a bonus call, and it's going to be complete Q&A. There's no curriculum. We're just going to go to the call, and I'm going to answer all of your questions that you have that you may not have had answered throughout the summer. I'm gonna invite the first 10 people to this call that sign up. And the bonus number 2 is that I'm gonna create a private Facebook group, so just the people that sign up for this program will be part of it. And it's a place to be accountable, to celebrate wins, to be part of a community of like-minded maniacs that don't wanna be filled with paper everywhere in their house. And I just want to be completely honest, right? This is my very first time doing this. I have loved my work one-on-one with clients, and I still have one-on-one clients. And I wanted to try to bring my paper management outside of that to more people. And people have been asking us for an affordable way to work with us for a real long time. So this is why I'm sharing this with you. So I have been creating filing systems. They're simple for a real long time. And I don't like filing. I really don't like filing. I really don't want to spend any time filing. If I had all the time in the world, I would not be filing. So here's just a couple of things that people have said about us in the past. Having a filing system made a huge difference for me. And when you know where to put the paperwork, you can finally stop piling. What a concept. I have a question. Okay, Kim, I'll come back to you. So I'm going to offer a 2-payment plan for this. If the $497 is out of your budget, you can do 2 payments of $297, one today and one in the next 30 days. And I'm going to post the link. I'm going to get out of here for a second. I'm going to post the link to sign up for it. If you're interested. Okay. So, so I'm offering 100% money back guarantee. If you sign up and you show up and you decide, this wasn't for me, I don't think it's gonna work, then I'll give you your money back. I'm gonna give a 3rd bonus for the people that actually sign up for it at tonight's call. I'm going to give you an additional call, and on that call, I'm going to teach people how to use my favorite tool that has kept me super productive and super organized, and it's my planner pad. And once again, the first 10 people that sign up will get invited to this call, because I want to make sure that I spend one-on-one time with people and that I answer all of your questions. So it's limited to 10 people. So I know you're thinking, I just don't want to spend the money, So I just want to remind you that this is the only time this summer that I will be offering it at this price. Once the summer is over, the price is going to go up significantly. You're probably thinking, I don't have time. It's summer. Why do you have to do this in the summer? And I get it. It is a commitment. However, I always feel like if it's not now, then when, right? The holidays are right around the corner. The kids are going to go back to school. And before we know it, it'll be Thanksgiving. And if you don't start working on your paperwork now, then when is it ever going to be a good time? And people say to me all the time, like, well, I tried that thing before and it didn't work for me. So I'm going to say this to you. I promise you that if you show up for the calls and if you commit to doing work and if you commit to being part of the process, that I can help you fix the paperwork problem that you have around your home. And that's completely up to you. I'm going to show up. I'm going to do my thing. If you show up and you do your thing, I guarantee that you'll stop having paperwork everywhere. So once again, people say like, well, I don't know, this may not work for me. And I hate filing. I can't say this enough. Filing is like the last thing on my list. I always get bogged down in the process because I don't like filing. And my accounting filing right now, because I'm the last person to look at it, it's like piling up a little bit. Because of all the things that I could be doing, filing is literally the last thing I would ever do it. So I create systems for people with that in mind. I believe no one likes to file, so I create the most simple systems that people can have. So if you don't like filing, this could be the solution for you. So even if you only learned one thing, which is how long you should keep paperwork, would that be worth the time to you? So let me be clear. This is not for everyone, right? I think if you are completely overwhelmed by paper and you don't want to show up to the calls and you don't want to do your homework, this may not be the program for you. But if you show up and you do the thing, it will happen. This is not for people that think that I'm just going to give you a magic wand. There is no magic wand. I'm really sorry. That's bad news. But if you're people that don't want to learn, if you're going to show up and be like, well, I know how to do this, or I'm going to do it better than you know how to, this is not going to work for you either. So once again, this is an excellent value, and I have never offered this before. So I hope that I can help you clear up your kitchen table so you can eat there again and you can go back to working to your office, and that you can proudly invite your friends over to your home. So I'm going to answer some questions over here. I really want solutions. Okay, so the question is, I really want solutions. I'm scared that it won't work because I have paper piles issues, and yes, bags of paper. Oh yes, but I so desperately desire paper solutions. Okay, well, so maybe I know you said you have to run, but what do you think the reason is that you have piles around the office? The majority of the time, people have piles, and just based on my personal expertise and what I have noticed in the past is that the reason why people have piles is because they don't know what to do with their paperwork. So do you imagine that if you knew what to do with that paperwork, that you would have piles? That is a question. That is a question for you to answer. However, I believe you wouldn't. I believe if you understood how to deal with the paperwork and where it should go, you'll be much less likely to have piles. So that was a really good question. Thank you for being honest. The question is, can I send an email with the registration link and details to the call of the people that attended tonight? And the answer is yes. As soon as we finish this call, I will send you a link to the registration page, so you can think about it. But by the time I wake up tomorrow, whoever the 10 people are that have signed up are the people that are going to receive bonus. So I'm going to give you a bit more than 20 minutes to think about this. However, I also know that my clients tend to get overwhelmed about decisions, and sometimes they overthink things. So I want you to just not overthink it, and I want you to think like, if I only learned a couple of things, would this be worth the $4.97 that I'm paying for this program? So Kim says, I do a good job with all family and personal paperwork. It's my business paperwork that drives me crazy. I always feel like I have to leave stuff out. Oh, sorry. Stuff moving here. I have to move stuff out. It ends up in piles on my desk. So I think, Kim, I think that the reason why you probably have these piles is because you don't have a good system for your temporary paperwork and the things that you need to, they are waiting to be resolved on. So you probably can learn something from that process, because that's going to be into the temporary filing system a little bit. Maybe your business filing system is also maybe too complicated, or may not be complicated at all, or you may not have enough files. So it's like, it's probably a little bit of both. My feeling, without really understanding what is it that you're struggling with there, is that you're missing a place for the paperwork to go, and that's why it's piling around everywhere. At the bottom of the question is like, what is the purpose of keeping some of this paperwork, and how do you manage it in the short term? That's creating piles. Like, at one point, I mean, I own a business too, and there are certain things that I do have projects I'm working on, so there are piles there, and I manage those through through project bins. That way they're containerized and away from my desk, but there's a level of that you cannot avoid because you own a business. However, there's some of it that can definitely be managed. Okay, let's see what else we have. Oh, good job. Thank you. Suggestions. Oh, Am says, getting this done before the holidays could end up releasing enough money or value so that your class pays for itself after the holidays. Paperwork done could mean a completely different experience of the holidays. I totally agree. Like, I don't know. We tend to get a substantial amount of calls from people during, like right before the holidays, people saying, oh my God, my family's coming over and I just don't know what to do it. And then at that point, we don't have enough time to really create filing systems for people. So we should just have to put all the stuff in boxes and do the dreaded take it to the basement and deal with it later kind of a situation. But if you get a kickstart now and you're in the boot camp, I completely agree. This could be the year where you're not shoving papers into, bags and boxes and storing it in the basement. So thank you so much for saying that. I appreciate it. Honesty, that's the best. Okay, let's see what else. I cover that. So I think I think once again, I would like for you to join me into this boot camp. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. This is going to be my first time, but it's not my first paperwork project. I'm going to give a ton of value. You're going to have a lot of good discussion about it. So I hope you can join me. I always wondered, when people think about, purchasing a program, like what is the one struggle you have with paperwork that you wish you could solve? You can share with us in the Q&A, or you can send it to me directly. Like, what is the one thing that you wish you could solve that seems to be a persistent problem for you? The last time I did this presentation, or a variation of it, somebody said, how are you ruthless without being reckless? And I think that being ruthless without being reckless has a lot to do with the thoughtfulness of the process, right? It's so easy to get frustrated about the piles everywhere. And honestly, sometimes I do that too. I will have this one, I have one persistent pile on my desk, but that's my, like Kim was saying, that is my like active projects I'm working on. And then sometimes I'm like, I just need it for it to go. And then I just start throwing things away. And in that process, it's very easy when you're in that frame of mind where you're like, oh my God, this pile just needs to go. It is so easy to be reckless and start throwing things away without being really thoughtful about the process. And I think that's sometimes when I see, just boxes in the basement. A couple of months ago, I was in Pittsburgh at the Andy Warhol museum, and they have a whole exhibit on his archival, which is basically is what he did. He I think it was once a week, he shoved all of the stuff that was on his desk into this box and then archived it into history. And they have sorted through, I want to say there's over 600 of them labeled and detailed about what's in the boxes. But it's like, I can see how we all want to do that. We want a clean space. We don't want to deal with it. We just want it to be gone, and it's like, shove it into a box and put it away. But it doesn't change the fact that you still haven't made any decisions and you still haven't created any systems. So you're likely going to find yourself in the exact same situation once again, sooner or later, which is the sad part. It just, I work with people a lot that it's like you have delayed making decisions. And so now you're like, you're going to clean up on a Saturday and you're going to put all of this stuff away and it looks really good when you're done. But I think Monday comes around and you have the exact same problem you used to have on Friday, except that your office is cleaned. At the bottom of the problem, you still don't have a way to manage the paperwork, and you still don't have a system that is going to be useful, and you still don't know what to do with the paperwork. So it's only a matter of time before it accumulates again, and you're just in this constant cycle of like, clean like a maniac so people can come over, and then feel good for a few days, and then persist to feel frustrated about the fact that there is the paperwork piling up again, because you're always going to have these, I'll put it here for now, piles, because I have no idea what to do with them, because you still don't have a system. So did I say systems enough time in this call? I think really what comes up for me time and time again when working with people is that if you can understand your paperwork, if you can understand why you're keeping it or how long you should keep it, it will help you make better decisions into the future. So I'm teaching you how to fish. I am not just giving you food. And then with time and understanding of your own family needs and your paperwork, it becomes a lot easier to manage it. So I wonder what's coming up for you. There's several people still left on the call. Like, tell me a little bit about what's coming up for you. Like, what is your one takeaway, your one action that you're going to implement? I'm going to check in on more questions while you're typing. I should wear my glasses. Chris, I don't know if you already mentioned filing papers, notes, making lists, etc., digital rather than filing hard copies. I miss a big chunk of your presentation because of a bad. Oh, I'm sorry. So the question has to do with all of the with notes and with filing notes, making lists, and things like that. We are not going to deal with anything digital in this program. I always feel that like what I'm going to teach you for your paper management, you can easily apply for your digital files, but we're not going to spend any time talking about digital. The only thing I'm going to say is it's literally all of the tools and guidance that I'm going to give you for your paperwork, you can easily convert that into your digital filing system. And there is a level of a lot. So the question has to do with notes and handwritten things that you have no idea what to do with. Normally, I tell people, like, pile those up in a basket, and you have to deal with those individually. There is no magic wand that we can use that would help you. In this situation, it sounds like there is specific to cases or the way that she's using them. And you could scan them and just have them, for the future. But I normally tell people, like, we always end up with a whole bunch of handwritten notes, and you're going to have to read through them, evaluate what they are, decide if they're worth the keep or if you should get rid of them. There is, unfortunately, not a good way to deal with them. I love a tool called Evernote, which may be something that you want to try and investigate and use. In Evernote, you can take pictures of things, and then you can store them easily digitally. And you could tag them for multiple things. So if they were like your to-do list, you could tag it for that, or if they were a specific client, or if they were a phone number, or if they were, you can do different tags. But without fully understanding what those notes are, my first question is really like, how are you using these notes into the future? What is I write notes a lot just to keep track of notes. So, and I also write notes just to stay focused, because sometimes I get very easily distracted. So if I'm not writing, I'm not listening. But immediately, I've learned over the years that I never go back and read my notes. So once I'm done with something, I will maybe quickly glance at it. If there was like a book suggested or a tool that I want to use, then I transferred those into my planner pad. And then whatever else was in the notes, I probably just throw them away. There are a few exceptions to that rule, but the majority, I sit on a lot of conference calls, and I do a lot of things with people that require, video conferencing or phone conversations, and I'm constantly scribbling and writing. And if I was to keep all of those notes, my office would be just completely filled. So I try to be very ruthless about the note taking, and then processing those notes at a reasonable time, and then getting rid of them as soon as I possibly can. I hope I answered your question. See if there are more questions. Well, somebody on the call said, I'm just going to call Alex. Alex is somebody on our team, so good call. That works too. Okay, let's see if there was more on my presentation that I wanted to address. And then I'm going to wrap up the call. I already did Q&A, so that didn't work. Okay, so wait, there's another question. I was recently diagnosed and I still. Well, thank you. Thank you so much. I think getting diagnosed sometimes is, I try to look at it as a victory. I see a lot of my clients that struggled for years. I don't have any qualifications to diagnose people, but sometimes based on their struggle, I can probably tell. And I found that people that embrace their diagnosis and try to really understand how to use their gift are much better at it than when people try to look at it as it's a real challenge and a disease. So one book that I would recommend, stepping out for a minute, is this book. It's Delivered from Distraction by Dr. Hollowell and Dr. Ratney. I'm doing a book club for Organizing Maniacs on it, and I think this is a great book. It has some amazing amount of resources. So I hope that that you getting diagnosed feels like a good thing to you. But I agree, paperwork is a really big deal for people. they're challenged just because there's sometimes short-term memory that's really difficult. My one client that had 5 files that were named the, different things for the exact same piece of paper, she couldn't remember what the files were. So trying to really work with your brain is extremely important. Yes, it's a victory. Good for you. Yeah, you're welcome. So I think it's like understanding how your brain works is like the first. How your brain works is the first step in the process. And I like to, remind people that we're so talented in so many ways. So embrace your talents where they come from. I remember I'm the girl that burns popcorn, and I'm totally cool with that. Like there was a time when I used to feel like totally inadequate, that I couldn't cook for like big parties, or that I couldn't entertain. But I have so many other talents, and I'm just, I'm just not very good at following directions when it comes to like food prep. And, I'm totally okay with that. I've come to understand that that's not how my brain works. And if it doesn't have any pictures, it's just really never going to happen. So just remember that. Thanks for the book recommendation. Better than anxiety and depression. Absolutely. And I think that having an understanding on how your brain works is like the first step. And then understanding how to embrace your talents is the second step. And then dealing with all of the other things that come from it may become a lot easier, because now you're like, okay, this is what I do. And I always tell my clients, like, don't use it as a crutch, right? Just use it as like, this is who I am. This is how I'm learning. This is how I'm going to do things. And just try to surround yourself with supportive people. I think when it comes to paperwork, there's a lot of things that, just lay around. So like, maybe that's not your talent. Maybe find somebody in your family that can manage that. Maybe ask maybe your partner should be in charge of paperwork and not you. And that should be okay. Like in the division of labor, we have to find what are our talents and what we're good at, and how we're going to thrive in our families, and how we're going to help everybody, be the best they can be. So don't force yourself. Okay, here's another question. Oh, wait, I already answered that. The boot camp would make a fantastic gift to someone with brain issues. Well, I don't know. I don't know that I would. I always say, whenever you're gifting something to somebody, just make sure it would be a welcomed gift, right? So you don't make them feel bad about themselves. But yeah, I absolutely love the gift of organization. I clearly give it to people all the time. But I do it in a subtle way. So they can always have the right to reject it. And then I'm not feeling bad about it. So thank you for saying that. The organization is the best gift ever. Let's see what other. So there were no takeaways. Nobody learned anything. Okay, so how are we doing? It's about 7:20. We have spent a lot of time here. Let's see, my presentation is done. And then we're gonna, I'm gonna do that. I learned a lot, thank you. So remember that if you decide to join us for the boot camp, it's $497. And if you, for some reason, don't get any value from it, I will give you your money back. And I want to thank you so much for joining us today. There were several of you that were here the whole time. I really appreciate all of the engagement, the questions, the suggestions. If you haven't already registered and you want to join us, please do so. I will send a link because I know it's a little bit glitchy if you're listening to it on your phone. I will send you guys a link tonight. And if you want to join us, that would be super awesome. We're going to have a great time, and we're going to be paper free. It's like a win-win. So I'm going to turn my mic off, and I'm going to turn the video off, and I'm going to leave the chat open for a few more minutes just in case there are any other questions left. And once again, thank you so much for coming. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to share these tips and my program with you. I am extremely grateful for all of your support, those of you that have allowed us into your homes to help you with any sort of organization over the years. I'm always so extremely grateful for the opportunity that we get to come and spend time with you. And I'm really, really grateful for that. So thank you so much. And okay, I will see you soon and have a good night.